So, in my last video, I talked about the Republican presidential debate in Iowa and what I thought of it. And one thing I did not discuss was a moment from the debate that provided a lot of fodder for Democrats. And, well, take a look at this. This was a really stupid question.
I'm going to ask a question to everyone here on the stage. Say you had a deal, a real spending cuts deal, 10 to 1, as Byron said, spending cuts to tax increases. Speaker, you're already shaking your head. But who on this stage would walk away from that deal? When you raise your hand, if you feel so strongly about not raising taxes, you'd walk away on the 10 to 1 deal.
Now, that created quite a stir on the left. And the reason it was a stupid question is because tax increases means different things to different people. You often hear President Obama speak of raising revenues and reducing spending in the tax code. These are either less than clever euphemisms for tax increases or wonkish phrases that make sense to people familiar with the Internal Revenue Code. We can increase revenues to the federal government without raising income taxes. George W. Bush did that. Ronald Reagan did it, though to be fair, he also raised other taxes. JFK did it, with a Democratic Congress, mind you. As for reducing spending in the tax code, there are provisions, such as refundable tax credits, that result in a lot of people and businesses actually getting a check from the federal government. Our tax code is so messed up and grossly unfair. That's why I was so glad and surprised to see Lawrence O'Donnell, of all people, say this on MSNBC.
Look, I used to write tax law in the Senate. I know the tax code is unfair. Everyone knows that. You can't have fair outcomes in government if you don't begin by collecting revenue fairly, and we're not doing that now.
Yes, exactly. Our tax code is unfair. 28% of all federal taxes are paid by just 1% of American households. That same 1% pay 40% of all federal income taxes, which is where the government gets most of its money. Yet 51% of American households, wage earners, 51% of American wage earners paid no federal income tax in 2009. Many of them actually got money from the government, even though they already had an income. So yes, Larry, our tax code is unfair. I'm delighted to hear you acknowledge that. It's a different tune from the one you usually sing. I just hope you didn't undermine that incredibly sound point by saying something stupid immediately afterward.
We're leaving out the super rich from their responsibility to this country, the country that made them the super rich, and that's got to change.
No! Again with the super rich. That's not what I meant when I said our tax system is unfair. Oh, Larry, you're so wrong. Speaking of the super rich and people who are wrong, Warren Buffett wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times this week urging Congress to stop coddling the super rich. Now, Warren Buffett likes to boast about how low his effective tax rate is, but what he's not telling us is the reason why, at least not all the reasons why. As Peter J. Riley wrote for Forbes magazine, Mr. Buffett's secret, which you can find blasted all over the internet, is one of his famous quotations: "Our favorite holding period is forever." You only pay income taxes at any rate on realized appreciation. An investment with a holding period of forever incurs a capital gains tax of 0%, while all along the holder can be getting wealthy from appreciation. And as Robert A. Greene writes in a separate article, Mr. Buffett not only gets richer as his stocks increase in value without having to pay any taxes until he actually sells the stock, he can then take those shares of stock and give them away as gifts to charities that qualify as deductible charitable contributions for income tax purposes. So he can not only get richer from appreciation on these stocks as they go up in value, he can then take those shares of stock, gift them to qualifying charitable organizations, and then claim that as a deduction and use it to deduct from the income taxes he does pay. So, Mr. Buffett, if you want to pay more taxes, then have at it. You can stop exploiting these loopholes. They're not really loopholes, they're the laws. And send a bigger check to the federal government, or you can go online to pay.gov and make an online contribution to help reduce the federal debt. But don't pretend that you and your tycoon buddies are being coddled. Back to this issue of what's fair. One of the first articles I wrote for my website was about it was taking issue with some things that Austin Goolsbee, who was then the chairman of the Council on Economic Advisors, said in an interview. And he talked about how taxes on the wealthiest Americans are the lowest they've been in some 60 years. That's not actually correct, and I pointed that out. But our tax burden as a percentage of GDP is at a 60-year low. However, in the article, I pointed out the real reason, or I actually quoted from an AP article that explained the real reason why our tax burden was at a 60-year low in this country. And it mentioned more generous tax credits for college students, working families, homebuyers, and the working poor. And somebody commented on my article asking if I had implied that higher taxes should be imposed on students, families, and the working poor because of fairness. So I replied to his comment, and you can read the entire column and the exchange on my website. It's still on my website, or you can go to my blog. I actually copied and pasted it onto my blog as well, so you can go there. It's really, a question. I really think that this, when you have 51% of American households not paying any federal income taxes, which is where the government gets the bulk of its money, almost half, then that is even a worse problem than 1% of households paying nearly 40% of all income taxes. And oh, that was weird. I just had to cut in here to make one final point about this whole issue of fairness in taxation. I recently learned that my folks have never been allowed to deduct a single dollar, not even a cent, for all the money that they have spent on my education, putting me through college and now law school. They have never been allowed to deduct any of that on their income tax return, because those deductions for education expenses, phase out the higher your income level is. So they have not been allowed to deduct any portion of that. The tens of thousands of dollars, actually now it's probably more than 100,000 total that they've spent over the years, and I don't think that's fair. But I want to know what you think. Post a response, comment below. Until next time, don't mess with the right-wing genius.